London Dairy Supply is dedicated to affordable, quality products that are sustainable and environmentally responsible. We stay current with innovations and improvements in the dairy industry to find the best and most effective products available on the market today, always delivered with professional, friendly, and efficient service. Learn more about London Dairy Supply at londondairysupply.com.
This podcast was recorded on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Ottawandaron, and Wendat peoples. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties.
Shobita, you know what I like about this episode?
What?
Makes a lot of sense.
And nickels and dimes and dollars?
Absolutely. It's all about big digital change.
Really?
Come on, let's buck the system.
No, really, stop it.
I'm Adam Kaplan.
And I'm Shobita Sharma. And if you haven't figured out already, this episode of Towards London is about fintech. And no, Adam, this does not mean technology from Finland.
I was not going to say that. Fintech is short for financial technology, and we're going to hear about how the most risk-averse institutions in Canada are using 21st century methods to innovate while making sure your money is safe.
And we're going to hear from dorm room friends who got together and hatched an idea that led them to rethink payment processing. You know, your credit cards and debit cards. And they did it in a way that made them one of Canada's fastest growing companies.
And finally, we're going to crack the nut on bitcoins and find out how so-called taboo technologies are changing the very nature of money.
Adam, can you grab me a book from the shelf behind you?
Tolstoy's War and Peace.
Actually, I think that reads Hunger Games.
How did that get in here?
You're holding a real physical book that's made of atoms just like anything else in the real world. Someone had to print it, ship it, and you had to buy it. And if you want to read it, you actually have to have it physically with you.
Sure.
But I can buy an ebook that's entirely digital. It's composed of bits. So that means I can get it instantly. And if I want to read it, I just need my tablet or a smartphone. And it also means I can highlight and comment a passage on one device and have it show up on others instantly, plus so many other great features.
Yeah, but does it smell like a book?
They are working on that too. But distributing things via bits over the internet instead of atoms in the real world means that the way software gets developed is changing too.
How so?
When my dad bought me my first copy of Microsoft Word, it was on a CD and we went to a store to get it.
Sure, I remember this. You know, and then when a new version came out about 18 months later, you had to go back to the store and buy the next major update.
Right. That's called a waterfall process, where a very large version of a software drops very infrequently, like every year or so. And you usually get it on a CD or a USB thumb drive.
In other words, via atoms.
Right. Now think about the process that we use to collaborate on our script for this podcast. We use Google Docs. And do you know when that gets updated?
You know, no, actually, I don't know when it gets updated.
Well, that's because it's constantly changing without us doing anything. And to do this, Google uses a process called Agile, where software is updated frequently, sometimes every few days, and entirely behind the scenes.
As bits. You know, it's like they just don't need us atoms anymore.
Almost made it through the segment. But what happens when software that's handling millions upon millions of dollars in transaction every day needs to get updated? And what happens when it's really old software?
The software that I represent has been around for 20 years. There's a lot of functions that we have on the software for that 20 years that have evolved. And they evolve because customer needs change. Or new technology has come out and we want to be able to mimic that behavior.
Tiffany Talbot is a Scrum Master at TD Bank in their technology division. Now, before Adam declares Scrum Master to be a made-up thing, here's what Tiffany had to say about it.
So Scrum Master is a role within the Agile software development methodology. So overall, I'm responsible for managing a team of developers, quality assurance, designers, and business analysts. And all of those folks will be doing some software development in a 3-week time span. And then at the end of that 3 weeks, we're hoping to be able to have something that's shippable out to the customers. And so my role is to make sure that everybody can do their job smoothly, remove any impediments that might be preventing them from doing their jobs, and really shelter them so that they can focus on getting that work done in the 3 weeks.
Wait a second, 3 weeks? They're pushing out new financial software every 3 weeks at a bank? in Canada?
Well, Tiffany has been in this business for a very long time, 21 years. That's 1996. To put that into perspective, that's when Backstreet Boys were ruling the airwaves. I was in grade 6, and the very first episode of Third Rock from the Sun aired on NBC.
I started originally with Canada Trust, so I've been in the FI industry for about 21 years in total. So I originally started with Canada Trust, and back then we had a very similar retail application that we were using. So when TD and Canada Trust merged, we kept that software. So TD inherited or adopted it, but instead of building something brand spanking new from bottom up, they just leveraged what Canada Trust had already, brought it over to TD, and then we branded it to the TD brand, and just kept building upon that.
The retail application that Tiffany is talking about is the software that tellers use in the branch, and it's about as mission critical as any software can be.
Well, sure. That makes sense. If the software doesn't work, people can't deposit or transfer money or really do anything that you would normally expect to do at a teller window.
Not to mention what can happen if there's a security hole. But Tiffany assured us that there are a lot of checks and balances when it comes to security, and that allows her to focus less on risk and more on the value her team can deliver to the business.
I think really what it boils down to is, what does the customer need? What are we lacking in our application to be that much better so that we can service that customer to whatever need that they have? We are also looking at what's existing on the application to make it better, whether it's faster or streamline that process. So for the teller. So, if it's 4 or 5 keystrokes right now, maybe we make it 2 keystrokes, but it's speeding up that service that they're providing to the customer too, so they're not waiting for long periods of time. So from my experiences, what can we do to make our application better to service the customers in a better manner? What gaps are on there? And then also, how can we improve that teller experience?
More than just making transactions go faster at the counter, Tiffany is working on projects that are at the core of what TD is doing to support their customers, well, however they choose to do their banking.
We want to have what we call an omni experience. So if a customer did their banking online and then walked into a branch or picked up the phone, they want to have the same customer experience across all of those platforms. So yes, our web based banking application certainly introduced this first, and then the retail branches are starting to follow suit. So we're building that omni platform.
So what about when I go into the branch and the teller sees an alert come up on her screen and then she offers me a line of credit or something? Is that part of this?
Absolutely. Tiffany talked about that too.
There's an intelligence unit for that. So again, it looks at you as a customer and what products you have and what products potentially you could benefit from. And it looks at your type of your banking transaction that you've done. If you were in talking about perhaps some borrowing products, things like that. So yeah, there is some intelligence behind it. And it's basically based on your activity.
All this means they need to be able to respond quickly to the needs of tellers and bank managers and bank customers. And that's why they need to ship out software every 3 weeks or so.
So in the last year, they've moved over to this Agile software development methodology. And really what it means is that we can work in a collaborative fashion with all of those partners all at once. So we can hear their ideas. We can solution what they may want. We can talk about it, get their buy-in, and then go and build a real live product based off of that. And we can also pause in between if they decide to change their mind on something. So because we're collaborating all together and we're not sitting and waiting for one group to do this before I can move and do that, we are more flexible. And so that allows us to work on the software development, deliver something more quickly, and be able to be out the door to the branches for them to use faster.
Okay, so how many tellers are we talking about here?
We asked Tiffany about that as well.
So in Canada, we have 1,500 branches. In each one of those branches, I'd say there's probably minimum to 4 or 5 workstations. That's how many different people are working on the application at one time.
For those of you who were not able to do the math, that works out to be between 6,000 and 7,500 people working on that software, and many times at the same time. We also got a chance to ask Tiffany where she saw things going.
I think it really depends on the customer, how they want to do their banking. So if everybody starts shifting more to that self-serve or that online, then perhaps branches start to become advice centers, because people still want to talk to somebody, a living, breathing human being, especially when it comes to their banking needs or their investment needs or their borrowing needs. They want to be able to personalize with somebody and speak to somebody who's maybe been there, done that sort of thing, and still have that individual connection.
We'll put links to resources about Agile software development on the episode 4 page of our website.
Shobha, it's suddenly got a lot colder around here, and clearly you have done some shopping to pick up some boots. You get those recently?
Yeah, they are new, and I bought them online. And just as I was buying these gorgeous boots, I couldn't help but think about how much consumers' purchasing abilities have changed because of technology. Like, I bought these boots online and paid for them online, totally cashless.
Just like Shobha's boots, there are countless purchases being made possible both online and offline by payment processing companies around the globe. But Shobha, if payment processing companies are so common, how would one innovate?
Well, it sort of helps if you don't start off in fintech and instead in an industry that you can take a bite out of.
I was born in Africa, in Libya actually. And 2003, my family immigrated to Canada. I went to Western first, software engineering. I dropped out after 3 years. We started a business. It was an online food court. We sold it. And then we started Zomaron, the payments company, out of a need from everything we experienced with the first company that we sold, based on how hard and how difficult it was for entrepreneurs to be up and running with payments. And we're talking back in 2006 to 2009.
That's Tariq Al-Ansari from Zomaron, a national payment processing company that, despite its youth, is playing in the same sandbox as the big guys.
In 2006, Facebook was just in its infancy, and the iPhone was still a few years away from changing the way we communicate. Online purchases, especially ordering food online, was still an alien concept, and so was online payment processing.
And let's add another layer of complications. Tariq's customers were, well, exactly who you would think would order food online. They were college and university students, and they often didn't have credit cards. And if they did, they didn't like to use them because their limits were so low.
That business, we decided to go cashless. And we were one of very few websites in Canada at the time to implement Interac Online. And it's funny, one of the major banks in Canada was not part of Interac Online. And we had students emailing us saying, I switched to this other bank because my bank is not part of Interac Online. That's how much they loved it.
And so Tariq and his partner sold their food ordering business, and Zomaron was born.
They quickly added Visa and MasterCard through a sponsor bank in the US, and then started signing up customers. Basically, people who needed to accept debit cards and credit cards.
We started just, going to all the friends and family first, and then it went from there. And now we've been one of the fastest growing companies in Canada for the past few years, making it on Profit 500 list.
And to put this accomplishment into perspective, Tariq told us that 80% of payment processing in Canada is controlled by the major banks. So how does a payment processing company, something that's really not that uncommon, go from signing up friends and family to being on the Profit 500 list?
For the people who are in the fintech space, they know that fintechs are actually enablers, and they're not competitors with the banks, and they're not a threat to the banks. And the banks realize this really well. That's why they partner with a lot of fintechs. We do not take deposits, and that's their bread and butter, right? So where we are just focusing on certain niches, we are enabling certain industries or certain market verticals where we see the banks are not playing in, for example. After a while, we found out that we gained certain penetration in certain markets, and we have a significant market share in things like in the medical industry and charities and the auto industry. And we were like, wait a second, we know this market. We are sizable. I wouldn't say significant, but we're a sizable player in that market. We have good network and a lot of merchants that are actually our customers that love us, that process in that market. Why don't we think of payments from a different perspective?
Shobha, how do you think differently about payment processing? I sort of feel like that's trying to create a whole new peanut butter and jelly sandwich using bread, peanut butter, and jelly. It's the same result, it's just said differently.
I like the analogy, but I'll let Tariq explain.
So everybody in the payments industry thinks of payments as transactions and pennies and cents and dollars and basis points. If you put that on the side for a second and start thinking every transaction that shows up on my system is a user interaction, is a user experience that happened at my merchant and their customer. So if I'm processing money, payments for a car dealer, I shouldn't think of the transaction as a transaction, a payment transaction between the car dealer and myself. We started thinking of the user experience of that car dealer and their customer that walks into the dealer, and how can we enhance that user interaction. If you start thinking of their user experience and any pain points that you have, how you can improve their user experience, that's when you win big.
You know what? I'm thinking about how much easier things have become now. Like, you can order a vehicle for hire online. You can order coffee with an app.
Well, it is the age of the consumer, and convenience is key.
This whole new term, the on-demand economy, like Uber or the Starbucks app, there is a lot of other value adds that they're providing to the consumer and to the partner, it be a charity or a taxi industry or, the hospitality industry, or whichever industry, because it first comes out of a need for convenience, but then you add everything else that you can add to it.
So I thought the financial industry in Canada was super regulated. How can a fintech innovate with that much regulation?
Well, Tariq said that the level of regulation is actually a benefit to fintech innovators, not just here in Canada, but globally. In his mind, it's the job of the innovator and the entrepreneur to solve the problems that people have in a way that's valuable to the customers. And it needs to work 100% of the time, every single time.
The fact that a lot of the processes in the financial industry has a lot of manual pieces to it, that allows you as an innovator, as a fintech, to actually be able to introduce something different and win a market share. So with these manual processes, when you look at them, they're not put there by design. I would say it comes down to user experience. It's not about where you innovate, it's how you innovate. So a lot of it is the idea and then the execution behind the idea. So if you provide a killer user experience, by killer, I mean a 10 out of 10 user experience, something different than what I'm used to, people will come and they will buy your service, they will use it. So it's not which kind of fintech space to be in, but it's what user experience you provide, what you build in that user experience, and how do you solve a problem.
Now, the financial industry in Canada, well, it's not really changing, even though there is an opportunity to.
Canada sits on top of the world with tech, with innovation, with education, we're leading the world with that stuff. And in the same sense with tech, you're going to see this other shift and we have to, as Canadians, being as bright as we are, with the Canadian quality that we can produce to the world, we actually have to offer and invest as a government and as business owners into the next era of the human being living experience, to actually be able to build something that you can export to the rest of the world and lead the world with that innovation.
We'll put all the relevant links at towardslondon.com, including Zomaron's website and Twitter, plus Tariq's account, which may compel him to post something.
London Dairy Supply is dedicated to affordable, quality products that are sustainable and environmentally responsible. We stay current with innovations and improvements in the dairy industry to find the best and most effective products available on the market today, always delivered with professional, friendly, and efficient service. Learn more about London Dairy Supply at londondairysupply.com.
Shobhita, in addition to your boots, it looks like you've done some jewelry shopping recently.
Huh?
That gold pendant, it's not new?
No, in fact, it's very old. It's been in my family for generations. Gold is very important in my family.
And not just yours, I think. The world's had a fascination with gold since the earliest days of civilization. Human beings around the globe have been fascinated by the stuff.
Why is that?
I don't know. But I bet we can give someone a call to find out.
Hi.
Hi, Dad. Thanks again for being available for this.
Oh, good. Thanks, Adam. Thanks for calling.
Dad, growing up, you would tell me and Mitch a bedtime story about some mysterious gold in the family. Would you mind telling that story again on tape?
Okay. So a great uncle of mine owned some very prestigious properties in Montreal, actually around Canada. And in the Second World War, he was able to hide all of the Crown's gold in a number of his buildings through Canada. And as a result of that, after the war, he received an OBE, that's the Order of the British Empire, for having done so.
The Crown's gold, as in Canada's crown corporations, that kind of crown?
No, the Crown of England, the UK. They sent it over surreptitiously marked, in some reading that I had done, marked fish. And they were hidden there through the war. No one ever knew a thing about it.
So why is gold so important? I mean, I understand that it's a rare element, but it seems like it's a pretty arbitrary thing to put as much value on as we do. And it seems like that arbitrary value has been around for a long time, and it seems like it's pretty much global. Well,
gold, as you suggest, has been very rare and hard to find, literally hard to find, hard to mine, and it always has retained its value because it is perceived to have that value. And so gold has been a constant rarity throughout the millennium.
Okay, it's rare. I get that. But is that it? I mean, it seems like there are other rare metals.
Okay, so gold has always been a precious commodity because it's been rare to find, as you suggest, and it's been easy at the same time to mold and to form into jewelry. So people have always liked it, both to suggest wealth and to show that their wealth is there. But because it's so malleable as well, it's been easy to make into coin. And coin of the realm, so to speak, has always been gold up until modern times.
I mean, okay, well, what about silver? Why not silver? That's another rare metal.
Silver is not as rare as gold, is far more plentiful and won't retain its value much like gold, or won't have the same value or a value much like gold. But then one might suggest, well, what about platinum and those kinds of elements as well? And the fact is there's not enough platinum to meet what the need of gold has always met. So although platinum is rare, it wouldn't have the same amount of platinum to be able to be traded, so to speak.
Thanks, Dad. Have a great evening.
We will. Thanks.
Thanks again, Dad.
Bye.
So I picked up on some interesting words there. Hard to mine, currency, coin. It all leads me to one conclusion.
Still a mystery for many people, and that's a question that I get asked a lot. It's like, why does Bitcoin has value? Like, why would people spend $3,000-$4,000 to buy one Bitcoin? Like, how come it's $3,000, not $1,000, or like not $10?
That's Professor Jean-Philippe Vernier from Ivy Business School at Western University. He's also the founding coordinator of the Crypto Capitalism Center and the co-director of the Scotiabank Digital Banking Lab, both at Western.
When we recorded this interview a few short months ago, the price of a Bitcoin was about $3,000. Today, famously, it's over $7,000 per Bitcoin. The reason for that is part of what Professor Vernier is studying.
We're trying to understand how this price is formed and why does it not stay flat. And so there's a very short, simple, and a bit stupid answer to this question. It's like supply and demand actually explain the formation of the price. But the supply part is actually pretty easy to figure out because the supply of these currencies, cryptocurrencies, is very predictable, and it's embedded in the software code that's open source. So anybody can predict how many more units of Bitcoin are going to be put in circulation in the next 24 hours, in the next 3 months, in the next 2 years.
Okay, let's step back a bit so I can understand this. What is a Bitcoin and what qualifies it as a cryptocurrency?
Well, remember the bits and atoms thing that we were talking about earlier? There are some downsides to having things stored as bits, specifically that if something is comprised of bits, perfect copies of it can be made virtually infinite number of times.
Like if I wanted to pirate that ebook you're reading, all I need to do is make a copy of it, and in seconds it's mine.
Right. And that's why companies started using cryptography to protect those files, which is where Professor Vernier got his start. He was studying how digital piracy, like you making a copy of my ebook, was forcing the entertainment industry to evolve. This is all part of something called socially contested organizations.
Socially contested organizations. That sounds like a made-up thing.
No, it's not, Adam. But here's how Professor Vernier explains it.
Well, socially contested means that there's a large portion of civil society that would find a particular practice or a particular innovative practice, in this case, to be unacceptable. And it can be for many reasons. So if you think of industries like the weapons industry or the tobacco industry or gambling, these are all industries that sometimes we call the sin industries that are socially contested, sometimes for moral reasons, sometimes because of the harm that they can cause. And I was interested in the relationship between social contestation and innovation to the extent that it creates evolution in capitalist economies. And so I did a lot of work on piracy and how over the last few centuries, the phenomenon of piracy has basically been very much related to the notion of innovation and to the death of old industries and the creation of new ones.
Plus, Bitcoin as a currency has been linked to online drug sales, money laundering, not good stuff. And for a while, the US government classified cryptography as a military weapon. This led to other issues.
In the 90s, for example, it was illegal for hackers to create new tools for cryptography and exchange them with some of their peers across the world. Because by sending an email containing a new innovation in terms of cryptography, you are essentially exporting a weapon abroad. And so cryptography was considered to be a matter of national security, was considered to be a weapon. And so innovation was very much hampered until very recently when the policy around cryptography became a little bit more flexible and allowed hackers to actually work.
Okay, but I kind of still don't understand how Bitcoin works. I mean, it's encrypted. I get that. But what's being encrypted and why does that have value?
Let's start with your first question. Do you have a coin, like a nickel or a quarter?
Sure, here's a quarter, but I need that later for laundry.
Haha, money launderer.
See, I was trying to set up for that joke.
Okay, so you've just given me a quarter, and because it's a thing made of atoms, it's virtually impossible to perfectly duplicate, which means that now I have this quarter and you don't.
But I'm getting it back though, right?
Now, if I give you a copy of my ebook,
you could make a perfect copy, so both of us could have one.
Right, because it's stored as bits, which I can make perfect copies of. But that's piracy and that's illegal. Bitcoin solves that copying problem because it uses cryptography. Okay, this is key. It stores the movement of every single bit in a global transparent ledger called blockchain.
The data that are stored in a blockchain cannot be copied indefinitely without other people noticing it. So in a technical computer science term, it means that you cannot double spend a particular bit of data that you have. It's in the case of payments, it means that if you own a particular unit of Bitcoin, you cannot make a copy of it to be able to purchase twice as much merchandise as you would normally. And so it's a protection against theft. It's a protection against illegal copies of digital files.
But Shobhita, I thought Bitcoin was supposed to be anonymous. That's why the criminals like it.
It is anonymous in that you can look at the blockchain and you can see what trades have happened and which digital wallet each Bitcoin is stored in, but you can't necessarily tell who the owner of the wallet is. But that's not where the real mystery of the Bitcoin lies. I will remind you that each Bitcoin is now worth more than 7,000 US dollars. That's double of what it was worth only a couple of months ago. Professor Vernier helps us understand why this could have happened.
So what is left to understand is demand. Why would people want to buy these cryptocurrencies? And there's a number of reasons why people would want to buy them. The basic reason is that they create value is by cutting costs in already existing industries. There are huge economies to be made by using blockchain technology in this area. And so if you think of all the transaction fees that are basically paid out to payment processors like Visa, MasterCard, Western Union, PayPal, etc., on a yearly basis, if you replace all these payment processors by cryptocurrencies, you're basically freeing billions of dollars. And these billions of dollars explain why Bitcoin has value, because Bitcoin is creating the possibility for freeing this cash that is now being captured by intermediaries. And so it's actually possible to estimate how much value can be created in new industries and how much cost can be cut in existing industries. If we have technologies today that allow us to potentially remove, at least partly, some of these intermediaries, we will be living in a very different economy. And some people say that we should come up with a different name for that economy because it will not look like the capitalism we've known for the last 400 years. It will look like something else. So some people have proposed the term crypto capitalism to describe an economy that's disintermediated and where people are able to transact peer-to-peer using cryptography as a source of trust, as opposed to using intermediaries as a source of trust. And so this is a very interesting aspect of these technologies, that they're forcing a lot of companies to react if they want to survive in the long term.
We'll put unencrypted links to Professor Vernier's website and Twitter on the episode 4 page of towardslondon.com.
Big thanks to Tiffany Talbot, Tariq Al-Ansari, and Professor J.P. Vernier for their contribution, and to Kapil Lakodia and Ashley Conningham at LADC for introducing us to Ms. Talbot.
Also, big thanks to Adam's dad. People were requesting his return, so you'll be hearing from him again. Speaking of, we love your suggestions and your ideas, so find us on Facebook, Twitter, and on Instagram, or send us an email at info@towardslondon.com.
Thanks to our sponsor, London Dairy Supply, and to Sammy Roach, who helped us out with some production support back at Webisodes.
If you have a chance, please rate and review us on iTunes. It makes a big difference. Until next week, I'm Shobita Sharma.
And I'm Adam Kaplan. This has been a Webisodes podcast.